The riverboat moved slowly along the winding brown water. The thick green walls of the jungle closed in on both sides. Large trees with heavy roots rose high above, their leaves forming a roof that blocked most of the sunlight. The air was warm and heavy. Aaron sat near the front of the boat, his eyes fixed on the water ahead. He had dreamed about this journey for years. Now he was finally here and was not alone. With him were two other explorers named Leon and Tomas. Leon was a skilled mapmaker who could find her way through wild lands by reading the shapes of the ground and the position of the sun. Tomas was quiet but strong, carrying much of their gear without complaint. They had also hired a local guide named Mateo, who knew the rivers and paths better than anyone in the nearby villages. Mateo was older, his face lined with years of hard work in the jungle. He spoke little during the ride, but his eyes never stopped moving. He looked at the trees and water as if they could speak to him. Team's goal was to find an ancient site hidden deep inside the jungle. Some believed it was older than the Mayan cities. Few people had ever seen it and come back. The stories told by locals spoke of tall stone figures standing in silence among the ruins. These figures were called the guardians. They did not move, but they never left their place. No one knew who built them or why they were there. Many believed they watched anyone who entered their land. As the boat moved further, the jungle became denser. Strange bird calls echoed from high branches. Insects hummed loudly in the thick air. Somewhere far off, a deep growl sounded, then faded. The sound made Tomas grip his pack a little tighter. Aaron noticed it, but said nothing. He did not want fear to spread among them before they even reached land. After hours of travel, Mateo raised his hand and told the boatman to stop. They had reached a narrow wooden dock, old and partly covered in moss. This was the last stop for the boat. From here they would walk. Mateo stepped onto the dock first, testing its strength. Then the others followed. They loaded their packs onto their backs and prepared to enter the jungle on foot. The path was narrow and uneven, with roots twisting out of the ground like snakes. The air grew hotter as they moved under the thick shade of giant trees. It was hard to see the sky. Aaron kept his eyes moving, taking in the strange shapes of the plants and the sounds all around. The smell of wet earth was everywhere. They walked for hours before Mateo stopped. He crouched down and touched the ground. There were markings in the soil that looked like carvings, not natural lines. Aaron bent down to see. The marks formed patterns like waves and circles. Mateo's voice was low when he spoke. He said these patterns were warnings. He told them that the guardians marked the land to tell people they were nearer, and felt a chill run through him. The jungle seemed quiet now. Even the insects had gone silent. He looked at Leon and Tomas. Leon's eyes were sharp, scanning the trees as if expecting to see something move. Tomas shifted his weight. Glancing around, they continued walking, but Aaron could not shake the feeling of being watched. Every rustle in the leaves made him turn his head. The deeper they went, the more he saw strange carvings on tree trunks. Some were faces with wide eyes. Others were shapes like hands reaching upward. The faces did not look like normal art. They seemed to be staring directly at him. After another long walk, the group reached a small clearing where they decided to rest. The sunlight broke through the trees in narrow beams, lighting the ground in golden patches. Aaron set down his pack and drank from his water flask. He asked Mateo about the guardians. Mateo's expression grew tense. He told them that the guardians were not simply statues. He said they were ancient watchers placed in the jungle before even the first great cities were built. They were here to guard something very old and very important. No one knew what that thing was, but it was said that the guardians judged anyone who came close to a Terran, asked if Mateo had ever seen them himself. Mateo nodded slowly. He said he had once seen a figure so tall that its head touched the low branches. It was made of stone, but its eyes were black like a deep river. It never moved, but when Mateo looked away and then back, it was gone. Since then, he had never gone near that part of the jungle again. The group ate a small meal and got ready to move again. The path ahead sloped upward, and the trees seemed even older here. Their roots formed walls along the path, and some trunks were so wide that 5 people could not reach around them. The air felt heavier, as if they were moving into a place that time had forgotten. Suddenly, Aaron stopped. Far ahead, partly hidden by vines, he saw something strange. It was a shape too straight and smooth to be part of a tree. He stepped closer and brushed away the hanging vines. Beneath them was a giant stone figure. Its face was carved with strong lines, and its eyes were made of smooth black stone. The eyes seemed to shine slightly even in the dim light of the jungle. Aaron felt certain that they were looking at him. Leon and Tomas joined him, staring up at the figure. It was at least twice as tall as a man. Moss and plants grew over its shoulders, but the face was clear, as if someone had cleaned it. Mateo stood a few steps back, not wanting to get closer. His voice was quiet as he said they should move quickly. The air around the figure felt strange, almost charged, like the air before a storm. As they walked past the figure, Aaron kept glancing over his shoulder. For a moment, he thought the head had turned slightly, but he told himself it was only his imagination. Still, the feeling of being watched did not leave him. Somewhere far in the jungle, a deep rumbling sound began. It was low and steady, like distant thunder. But when Aaron looked up through the trees, the sky was clear. They kept walking, but the path now felt different. The jungle no longer seemed like just trees and animals. It felt alive in another way, as if the land itself was aware of their steps. Aaron did not know what they would find ahead, but he was sure that the stories of the Guardians were not just tales. Something very old was here and had seen them arrive. The night fell quickly in the jungle. One moment the sky held a pale light through the leaves, and the next it was swallowed by darkness. Aaron and his team set up camp near a cluster of large roots that formed a kind of natural wall. The air was still and heavy, filled with the smell of wet earth and leaves. Leon worked quietly, setting up her mapping tools and marking the day's progress. Tomas gathered dry branches for a small fire, while Mateo sat apart, his eyes scanning the shadows beyond the trees. The fire's glow pushed back the darkness only for a short distance. Beyond that, the jungle remained a black wall. In the distance, strange calls of night birds echoed, mixed with the clicking sounds of unseen insects. Aaron sat close to the fire, staring into the flames while his mind returned again and again to the stone figure they had passed earlier. Those smooth black eyes seemed alive in some way, and he could not forget the faint glimmer they gave off in the dim light. He wondered if it had always stood there, or if it had moved closer while they were not looking. Mateo broke the silence. He said the jungle changes when the sun goes down. During the day it watches you, but at night it decides whether you belong here or not. His voice was low, almost a whisper. Leon asked him what he meant, but he only shook his head and stared deeper into the darkness. His hands rested tightly around the handle of his machete. As the night deepened, the sounds of the jungle began to change. The bird calls faded and were replaced by a low rumble far away. It came and went like slow breathing. Aaron glanced at Tomas, who had also noticed it. The sound did not match any animal they knew. It was deeper, more steady, like something large moving underground or through the trees without breaking. The Mayan lay down on his mat, trying to rest, but the feeling of being watched made his skin prickle. Every time he closed his eyes, he thought he saw a shadow move beyond the firelight. At some point, he drifted into a light sleep, but it was broken by Mateo's voice telling everyone to wake up. His tone was urgent but not loud. Aaron sat up quickly and looked in the direction Mateo pointed there, beyond the reach of the fire. Two faint lights glowed. They were not bright like lanterns or torches. They were steady and cold, like reflections of the moon on water. They were the exact shape and distance apart as the eyes of the stone figure from earlier. But this was impossible, because they had walked far from that statue. The lights did not move. They only stared from the darkness. No one spoke for several minutes. Then, as slowly as they had appeared, the lights faded into the blackness. Mateo told them to put out the fire and be silent for the rest of the night. Aaron wanted to argue, but something in Mateo's voice stopped him. The fire was put out, and they sat in the shadows until the sounds of the jungle slowly returned. Aaron kept his eyes open, listening to every rustle and distant call until the first pale light of morning touched the trees when the sun rose. They packed their camp quickly and moved on. Aaron noticed something strange as soon as they stepped onto the path. The ground, which had been marked by their footprints from the day before, was now smooth. Not only were their tracks gone, but the soil looked freshly pressed, as if something large had passed through during the night. The marks were wide and deep, not shaped like the feet of any known animal. The lines curved slightly, almost like they were made by heavy round bases rather than Leslie knelt to examine them. She said the marks began where their camp had been, and led deeper into the jungle. Aaron felt his heart beat faster. The idea that something large and silent had come so close while they slept filled him with a mix of fear and wonder. Mateo confirmed what Aaron had been thinking. He said the Guardians had visited them in the night. He explained that when the Guardians move, they do not break the plants or make noise. They glide as if the ground welcomes them. He warned that this meant the Guardians were aware of them now as they walked. The air seemed different. The usual calls of the jungle felt distant, and the shadows between the trees seemed thicker. After some time, they reached a ridge where the ground dropped into a narrow valley. In the valley below, half hidden by vines and fallen leaves, stood another stone figure. This one was shorter than the first, but wider, its arms resting on its knees as if it was sitting in thought. The black eyes looked up toward the ridge where Aaron and the others stood. Sunlight caught in those eyes, making them shine faintly. Aaron wanted to climb down to examine it, but Mateo stopped him. He said the valley was a sacred space and that the ground there could test them in ways they might not understand. Leon suggested they mark the location on her map and move around it. Tomas agreed. So they stayed on the ridge, moving carefully, through thick bushes until the valley and its strange figure were out of sight by midday. They reached a stream where they decided to rest. Aaron filled his flask with clear water and watched the surface as small fish swam past. He wondered if the Guardians had always been here, unseen and silent, watching generations of people come and go. The idea made him feel small but also part of something greater. Mateo told them another story while they rested. Long ago, a group of treasure hunters had entered the jungle searching for gold. They were never seen again. Weeks later, people from the village found the hunters' gear neatly stacked at the edge of the forest, but there was no sign of the men. Only strange wide marks in the soil led back into the jungle. Mateo said this was why no one from his village went deep inside anymore. The Guardians did not harm without reason, but they also did not forgive greed when they started walking again. Aaron noticed more and more of the strange prints in the soil, leading them onward. He could not tell if this meant the Guardians wanted them to follow, or if they were simply being led deeper without realizing it. The jungle felt endless, the air thick and green, the path ahead always twisting out of sight. Yet with every step, Aaron's curiosity grew. The Guardians were not just part of local stories. They were real, and they were moving as the sun began to set again they found a sheltered spot between two large stone walls covered in moss. Aaron could not tell if the walls were part of a natural formation or the remains of an ancient building. Either way, they offered a good place to spend the night. As they set their packs down, Aaron glanced at the far edge of the clearing. For a heartbeat, he thought he saw one of the black-eyed figures standing there, half hidden in vines. But when he blinked, the space was empty. That night, as darkness covered the jungle again, Aaron lay awake listening for the deep rumble that had visited them before. He knew they were no longer alone. Somewhere out in the blackness, the guardians were watching. The morning air was damp and heavy with the smell of wet leaves. Aaron woke before the others and sat on a smooth rock near the edge of the camp. The jungle was quiet in a strange way. It was not the normal silence before the day began. It felt like something was listening. Even the river nearby flowed without much sound, as if the water itself was careful not to disturb the stillness. When the rest of the team stirred awake, they ate a simple meal and packed their gear. Mateo kept glancing toward the east, as if he was waiting for something. Aaron finally asked him what he was looking for. Mateo said there was an old story that the guardians sometimes reveal the way to their most sacred places when they believe the visitors are meant to see them. He warned that such paths did not always lead back to safety. They began to walk, following the narrow trail they had used the day before. The ground here was uneven and covered with roots that twisted up like snakes. The light from the rising sun barely reached through the thick canopy above. Every few steps, Aaron saw faint marks in the soil, the same wide impressions he had noticed before. They led forward, sometimes vanishing under thick ferns, then reappearing ahead as if nothing had disturbed them. After an hour, the trail ended abruptly at a wall of vines and low trees. It looked like a dead end. Leon was about to mark the spot on her map when Mateo stepped closer to the wall and pushed aside the hanging vines. Beneath them was a row of stones, perfectly shaped and placed in a line. They were covered in moss, but their shapes were too straight to be natural. Thomas helped clear more of the vines, revealing a path of smooth stone slabs that disappeared into the shadows of the jungle ahead. The path was narrow, no wider than two people walking side by side. Each stone was carved with faint lines, many of which had worn away over time. Aaron crouched to study them and saw that some of the carvings were symbols he did not recognize. They were not like Mayan glyphs he had seen in books. These symbols were sharper, cleaner, and seemed older. Some looked like stars, others like flowing water, and some were shapes that made no sense to him at all. They decided to follow the path. The jungle around it grew thicker as they went, but strangely, no roots or plants had broken through the stones. It was as if the jungle had been kept back by an unseen force. The air felt cooler here, and there was a faint humming sound just on the edge of hearing. Aaron could not tell if it was coming from the stones or from somewhere far away. After walking for some time, the path began to slope downward. The light dimmed as the trees grew taller and closer together. Then the path opened into a wide plaza, covered in moss. In the center of the plaza was a circular stone platform, its edges carved with the same strange symbols. Around the platform stood more of the stone figures, at least a dozen of them. They were all different in shape and size, but shared one thing: the same smooth black eyes that seemed to follow the team as they entered. Aaron felt his breath catch as he stepped into the plaza. The figures were arranged in a perfect ring around the platform. Some stood tall with their arms at their sides. Others were crouched as if ready to spring forward, and a few held objects that looked like staffs or blades carved from stone. The details were sharp, too sharp for carvings left alone for centuries in the jungle. It was as if they had been made recently or maintained by unseen hands. Leon walked slowly around the edge of the plaza, making notes in her book. Tomas kept his eyes on the figures, his hand resting on his pack strap. Mateo stayed near the entrance, his gaze fixed on the platform. He told them in a low voice that this was a meeting place of the Guardians. People from long ago believed that standing on the platform allowed one to speak to them. Though no one alive had done so in many generations, Aaron felt drawn toward the platform. The carvings on its surface seemed to shimmer faintly in the dim light. He stepped up onto it, feeling the cool stone under his boots. The humming sound grew stronger, almost like a deep vibration under his feet. He reached down to touch one of the carved symbols. The moment his fingers made contact, the humming stopped and a new sensation filled the air. A stillness so deep it made the hairs on his arms rise. Then it happened. The black eyes of the nearest figure began to glow with a faint light. One by one, the eyes of all the figures lit up, forming a ring of dim blue light around the platform. Leon gasped quietly. Thomas stepped back toward the entrance. Mateo muttered something under his breath, too soft for Aaron to hear. Aaron's heart pounded, but he could not look away from the figures. The glow was not bright enough to light the whole plaza, but it was enough to make the air feel alive. The figures did not move. Yet Aaron felt as if they were leaning closer without stepping forward. The glow in their eyes pulsed slowly, like a heartbeat. Aaron removed his hand from the symbol, and the glow began to fade. The humming sound returned, though quieter than before. The moment passed, and the jungle sounds returned as if nothing had happened. But Aaron knew something had changed. The Guardians had noticed him. Mateo said they should leave the plaza before nightfall. He warned that being here after dark would not be wise. Leon wanted to stay and record more details, but even she agreed to move on when she saw the unease in Mateo's eyes. They left the plaza by a narrow stone arch at the far end. Beyond it, the path continued, winding deeper into the jungle. The black eyes of the Guardians seemed to follow them until they passed out of sight as they walked. Aaron kept thinking about the moment on the platform. It felt like the figures had been waiting for something, and his touch had awakened a part of them. He wondered if they would see more of them ahead, or if this was the closest they would come. The jungle around them seemed heavier now, the air thicker, as if they were being drawn towards something important. The path ahead twisted and vanished into shadow, but Aaron could not shake the feeling that the Guardians wanted them to follow. The stone path twisted through the jungle, sometimes vanishing under patches of moss before reappearing again. The air felt heavier with each step they took. The trees here were older, their trunks wide and twisted, their roots like great walls. No birds sang, no insects buzzed. Only the faint hum from the stones seemed alive as the light began to fade. They searched for a place to rest. They found a flat area surrounded by stone pillars, half buried in the ground and covered in vines. It looked like the remains of an ancient gate. Aaron thought it might once have been an entrance to a larger structure. They set their packs down and prepared a small fire. Mateo kept his back to the jungle, scanning the trees. His voice was tense, as he warned that the Guardians might test them tonight. Aaron asked what kind of test, but Mateo said only that they would know if it happened. Tomas and Leon exchanged uneasy glances, but said nothing. As night fell, the jungle became darker than before. Even the fire's light seemed weak against the shadows. Then the air changed. It was as if the world had stopped moving. The faint hum from the stones deepened, growing into a slow, steady vibration they could feel in their chests. Aaron rose to his feet, looking toward the trees. Shapes began to appear in the darkness. They moved slowly, without sound. One by one, the black-eyed figures stepped into the firelight. They were taller than Aaron had imagined when seeing them from a distance. The closest one's head almost touched the low branches. Its surface looked like stone, but in the flickering light, Aaron thought he saw smooth plates and faint lines. That reminded him of metal seams. The figures spread out, forming a loose circle around the camp. They did not speak, but the air seemed charged with meaning. Aaron felt a pressure in his mind, like the edge of a thought trying to form. Then, without warning, images filled his head. He saw skies with strange constellations, oceans under twin moons, and cities made of shining towers. He saw battles between massive ships, and a world burning under a sun that grew too bright. The images faded, replaced by the vision of a seed, small, glowing, pulsing with life. He felt its power, enough to create or to destroy. He understood that this was what the Guardians were protecting. The pressure in his mind eased, and the figures stepped back. One of them remained still in the firelight, its black eyes locked on Rin. Mateo spoke softly, saying the Guardians had shown Aaron the truth because they sensed something in him. Leon asked what it meant, but Aaron could not answer. He only knew they were now part of something far larger than their search for ruins. The Guardians had awakened for them, and they would not have done so without purpose. The figures withdrew slowly, fading into the shadows until the firelight touched only empty space. The hum in the stones faded, and the jungle sounds began to return. Yet the air still carried the weight of what they had seen. No one spoke for the rest of the night. Each of them lay awake, listening to the quiet and wondering what awaited them on the path ahead. Morning came slowly to the jungle. The first light of the sun crept between the trees, turning the mist into a soft golden haze. Aaron sat awake long before the others stirred. His mind was still caught in the visions from the night before. He could still see the black-eyed Guardians, still feel the weight of the images they had shown him. Mateo rose quietly and came to sit beside him. He studied Aaron for a moment before speaking. Mateo's voice was calm but steady. He said the Guardians did not give visions without reason. If Aaron had seen them, it meant the journey ahead would be heavier than before. Aaron asked if Mateo knew what the glowing seed was. Mateo nodded slowly and began to tell an old story passed down by his people long ago, before even the oldest stones in the jungle were placed. The sky was visited by beings from far away. They came not to conquer, but to protect. They had seen worlds destroyed by greed and hunger for power. In each place they visited, they left something behind, a seed of life. This seed was more than a plant. It was a source of energy, a fountain of knowledge, and a key to healing a dying land. But it could also be twisted. In the wrong hands, it could fuel weapons, bring storms, or even burn entire worlds. The Guardians, Mateo said, were the watchers of such seeds. They were not alive like humans, but they were not only stone. They were made with the knowledge of the beings who first came. They could move, think, and judge who was worthy to approach the seed. Most people never saw them. They moved silently through the jungle, appearing only to those they wished to test. Aaron listened without interrupting. The story fit the visions he had seen. He remembered the burning worlds and the great ships in the sky. He remembered the seed glowing in the hands of the Guardians. It felt less like a legend now and more like a warning when the others awoke. The group decided to keep moving toward the heart of the ruins. Mateo said they were close to the place known as the Circle of Eyes. It was said to be the center of the Guardians' domain. If the seed was anywhere, it would be there. They gathered their packs and started along the old path again. The jungle grew denser as they walked. The air was hot and damp, and the sound of their boots on stone echoed faintly. They passed broken stairways, walls carved with strange shapes, and pools of water where stone faces stared up from beneath the surface. Leon stopped often to sketch, her eyes filled with curiosity, while Tomas kept glancing at the shadows behind them. Aaron felt a strange calm, as if the Guardians were near but no longer hiding. By midday, they reached a wide clearing. In the center stood a perfect circle of towering statues, each with the same black eyes and still faces. The ground between them was covered with fine moss. No vines climbed the statues here, and no trees grew within the circle. It felt as though the space was protected by an unseen hand. As they stepped inside the circle, a change came over the air. It grew cooler, and the constant noise of the jungle faded until there was nothing but silence. The statues seemed to watch them from every side. Aaron felt the same pressure in his mind as before, but this time it was softer, like a hand guiding him forward. In the center of the circle was a single stone platform. Upon it rested a sphere of light. It hovered just above the surface, slowly turning, its glow shifting between gold and white. Aaron knew at once it was the seed from his vision. It was smaller than he expected, no larger than his two hands together. But the energy it gave off filled the air like a heartbeat. Mateo stepped forward first, bowing his head to the seed. He spoke in his native tongue, words that sounded both old and respectful. When he finished, he stepped back and motioned for Aaron to approach. Aaron hesitated, feeling the weight of the moment. Each step toward the platform made the glow stronger, until it felt like the light was passing through his skin and into his bones. When he stood before the seed, the black-eyed statue shifted. It was only a small movement, but it was enough to send a shiver through everyone. The eyes seemed brighter now, reflecting the glow of the seed. The pressure in Aaron's mind deepened, and once again the images came. This time, he saw a world of green fields and bright skies, a world healed by the power of the seed. Rivers ran clear, forests grew thick, and cities thrived without smoke or fire. But then the vision split in two, showing another path. The same seed used to build great weapons, to drain oceans, to shatter mountains. The difference between the two paths was not in the seed itself, but in the hands that held it. The vision faded, and the pressure lifted. Aaron realized the Guardians had shown him the choice, that they had not told him which path was his to take. The seed could save or destroy. It was not simply a treasure. It was a responsibility. Leon asked if they should take it with them. Tomas warned that carrying it might anger the Guardians. Mateo said the Guardians would allow it only if they believed the person was worthy. Aaron looked around at the circle of statues. The eyes of every one of them seemed to be on him. He felt their judgment, their silent weighing of his heart and intentions. At last, Aaron spoke. He said the seed could not fall into the wrong hands. They had to protect it, even if that meant never using it. He promised to keep it safe, and he swore he would never let it be used for harm. The statues did not move, but the air seemed to grow lighter. Mateo smiled faintly, as if he knew the Guardians had accepted Aaron's words. Slowly, Aaron reached out. His hands passed through the glow, and the seed lowered into his grasp. It was warm, almost alive. As soon as he held it, the glow dimmed slightly, as if the seed was resting. The statues remained still, their black eyes calm. No sound came from them, yet Aaron felt their approval in the stillness of the air. The group stepped back from the platform, the seed wrapped in a soft cloth. As they left the circle, the sounds of the jungle returned, the air warm again. But they all felt different. They had come to uncover ruins, but now they carried something far greater, a piece of power older than their world. That night, as they camped by a quiet river, Aaron kept the seed close. The Guardians had trusted him. He did not know if he was ready for what would come, but he knew one thing. They were no longer just travelers. They were keepers of something that could shape the future of not only their own world, but many others. The night was heavy with silence as Aaron sat close to the dim fire. The jungle seemed to hold its breath. The usual cries of birds and the rustling of leaves had faded away. Even the air felt still, as if the world itself was waiting for something to happen. The shadows between the trees began to change. At first, Aaron thought it was only his tired eyes playing tricks on him, But then he saw them. One by one, the guardians emerged from the darkness. Their massive stone forms moved slowly yet with a strange grace. Their eyes glowed faintly like the last light of the setting sun. They stepped into the clearing until they formed a perfect circle around the camp. Lena and Mara sat frozen, staring at the towering figures. No one spoke. There was no sound except the deep thump of the guardian's heavy steps on the ground. The circle closed, and the air seemed to grow warmer. The glow in the eyes of the nearest guardian brightened as it took a step forward. It was the same guardian Aaron had first touched in the plaza. Its stone skin was covered in ancient carvings, some filled with moss and some as sharp as if carved yesterday. It stopped only a few steps away from Aaron, towering above him without a word. Then something strange happened. Aaron felt a pressure in his mind, like a wave of thought touching his own, but without words. The world around him blurred, his vision filled with shapes and lights. He was no longer in the jungle, but standing under a night sky filled with stars. He could see constellations he had never known. Stars burned in strange colors, and some moved across the sky as if alive. In the distance, he saw vast cities made of crystal and metal towers reaching higher than mountains. Beings walked these cities, tall and bright, not human yet somehow familiar in the way they moved with purpose and care. The vision shifted. He saw war across strange worlds. He saw great ships tearing the sky apart with light and fire. He saw the bright beings fall and their cities crumble. Then he saw the seed. It was small, glowing with a light that was not of the sun or moon. It floated in a clear container, and every living thing near it grew stronger and healthier. But he also saw the seed used as a weapon, turning green lands into wastelands and making skies burn red. The meaning came to him without words. The seed was a gift, but it was also a danger. The guardians were not here to hide treasure. They were here to keep the seed safe from those who would use it for harm. The images faded, and Aaron found himself back in the jungle. His heart was pounding, and sweat covered his face. Though the night was cool, the guardian still stood in front of him. Its glowing eyes seemed to search his soul. He felt another wave in his mind. This time he understood. It was a test of his will, of his choices. The guardian did not speak, but Aaron knew what it wanted. He must choose whether to claim the seed or to leave it untouched. He must prove himself worthier. Thoughts raced. He could imagine the power of the seed. He could heal the sick, feed the hungry, maybe even end the suffering of entire worlds. But he also remembered the vision of fire and destruction. Power without wisdom was danger. The guardians had watched for ages. They had seen both sides of the seed's gift. Looked around. Lena and Mara were still frozen, watching the circle of stone giants. He knew they saw none of what he saw. The test was his alone. The guardian waited still as the mountains, but its presence pressed on him like the weight of the world. Aaron took a slow breath. His voice was steady though quiet. "I will not take the seed," he said. "If it is meant for the future, it should remain here safe until the right time. I will protect its secret." The words felt like they carried more weight than his voice alone could give. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the guardian lowered its head, slightly, a gesture that felt like respect. The glow in its eyes dimmed and the pressure in Aaron's mind faded. Around the camp, the other guardians stepped back into the shadows. One by one, they disappeared among the trees until only the still night remained. The jungle sound slowly returned, as if life was breathing again. Lena moved first. "What just happened?" she whispered. Aaron only shook his head and said, "They wanted to see if we were worthy to take something, but we are not meant to take it now." He did not tell her about the visions or the seed. Some truths were too heavy to share. The rest of the night passed without another sign of the guardians, but Aaron could not sleep. His mind returned again and again to the images he had seen. The seed was real, and the guardians were more than stone, more than machines. They were watchers from another age, bound to their duty until the time came for the seed's purpose to be fulfilled. As dawn broke a golden light, Spilled across the jungle, Aaron looked at the path ahead and knew they would leave the plaza soon. He felt no regret about his choice, only a quiet knowledge that the jungle's silent watchers had trusted him with something that must be guarded for all time. The morning sun rose slowly over the jungle, casting golden light across the trees. The mist lifted in soft waves, revealing the plaza and the towering stone guardians standing in silence. Aaron, Lena, and Mara gathered their things quietly, each of them felt the strange weight of the night before, though none spoke about it. The air was fresh, yet filled with a sense of something ending. They stepped onto the worn stone path, leading away from the plaza. Aaron turned his head for one last look at the guardians. Their massive shapes stood unmoving, yet somehow alive. He could feel their gaze following him even as the distance grew. Lena walked beside him, her eyes still fixed on the great statues. Mara followed behind, silent and thoughtful as they walked. The jungle seemed calmer than before. The leaves barely moved in the wind, and the calls of distant birds were soft and slow. It was as if the entire forest had accepted them and was letting them go in peace. They moved deeper along the path, but after some distance, Aaron began to hear something new. It was not the sound of leaves or water, but a low hum like the voice of the earth itself. They stopped to listen. The sound was faint, yet carried a strange warmth. It grew louder until it seemed to come from every direction. Aaron realized it was the guardians. The hum was not from their mouths, but from deep within their stone bodies. It was a song without words, a farewell that carried into the heart more than into the ears. It spoke of trust, of duty, of time stretching far beyond the lives of those who walked among them. Lena closed her eyes, listening, as if the song could tell her everything she wanted to know. Mara touched the trunk of a tree and whispered softly, "It feels like they are telling us to remember." Aaron nodded but said nothing. He understood the meaning. The guardians were giving them a final message. Not to return with greed, not to bring those who would harm, but to live carrying the truth in silence until the right time. The path grew narrow, and the jungle began to change. The great stones and carvings gave way to thick roots and wild growth. Sunlight streamed through gaps in the canopy, casting moving shadows on the ground. They crossed a small stream, and the sound of running water mixed with the fading hum of the guardians. It grew quieter with every step until at last there was only the sound of the forest again. By midday they reached the edge of the ruins. Here the trees stood taller, and the air smelled different, carrying the scent of open land beyond. Aaron paused, knowing that once they crossed this place, they would leave guardians behind forever. He turned one last time. The plaza was hidden by the jungle, but he could feel the weight of unseen eyes still watching, not in warning, but in promise. They continued until the trees opened into a wide, grassy clearing. The sun was bright overhead, and the sky stretched far into the horizon. Here they could see the hills rolling into the distance. Aaron stopped and let the warmth of the sun wash over him. For the first time in days he felt lighter, not because the journey was over, but because he knew they had done the right thing. Lena set down her pack and looked at him. "What will you do now?" Aaron thought for a moment. "I will go back to the village. We still have much to do. But I will not speak of what we saw, not yet." Mara agreed. "Some things are too big to be told in words. If we speak before the time is right, the wrong ears will hear." Aaron met her eyes and saw the same understanding there. They all carried the same silent burden. That night they camped at the edge of the clearing. The stars above were clear and bright. Aaron lay on his back, watching them. The vision of the other sky, the one the guardians had shown him, came to his mind. He thought of the seed and the cities and the wars. He thought of the guardians standing in endless watch over a gift that could change the fate of worlds. And he thought of how small yet how important his choice had been. As sleep began to take him, he felt the faintest tremor through the ground. It was so soft, it could have been the shift of roots or the breath of the earth. But deep inside, he knew it was the guardians. Returning to their eternal silence, they would remain until the day came when the seed must be awakened. And perhaps on that day, others would walk the same path and face the same choice. When morning came, the world felt fresh and bright. They packed their things and began the journey home. The path ahead was long, but the jungle no longer felt like a place of danger. It felt like an ancient friend watching from the shadows, guiding them out with gentle steps as they reached the last rise before. The land dipped toward the distant village. Aaron stopped for one final look back. The jungle lay behind them, vast and green, hiding its secrets once more. Somewhere within its depths, the guardians stood silent and unyielding, waiting for a future. Only they could see. Aaron turned and began to walk forward. The sun was rising higher. The air was warm and life stretched ahead, full of unknown days. Yet in his heart, the image of the stone watchers remained, and though no one in the village would know the truth, he would carry it always. The jungle had tested him, and he had passed. The seed was safe, the guardians still stood, and the world would go on in peace until the right moment arrived. So the three travelers disappeared into the rolling hills, leaving the silent watchers to their endless vigil, their stone eyes forever watching over the heart of the jungle and the secret they guarded across the ages.